we're going to lay out, oh, thank you. We're going to kind of lay out, you know, what we're going to be talking about as far as a work plan, and get into what our plan is for the CPTP, and what we need from everybody to help with that process. Your engagement now and your engagement the day of the meeting is certainly appreciated. So why don't we go ahead and do a quick roll call. Let's see here. Let me go through. We've got Mark Lohman, myself, Sarah, Molly, Dean, which Dean, congratulations. I understand you're going to be retiring. I just want to say that I've heard about all the great work that you've done from Marcy and Mike Massey, and I promise you will be sorely missed. And I think Marcy would agree. You're welcome to pop in and stay engaged at any time. You know, you're going to get bored in retirement, and you're going to look for something to do. Just ask Mike. He's never going to retire. No. Molly, thank you for joining us. Brian Johnson, Mary White, she's back. Mitch Dickey, LaDonna, Antoinette, Shannon, Eric, Beth is a guest that I invited to our meeting. I will ask her in a minute to come off mute and introduce herself, and I'll kind of explain why she was invited. And then Jasmine, if you didn't hear your name called, please put your name in the chat for Sarah to record your attendance. So just as far as a guest, Beth, can you introduce yourself?
I can. Thank you very much, Craig. My name is Beth Gonzalez. I'm with Pace Suburban Bus, but I am on the Workforce Investment Board for Will County as well. I have a lot of roles, a lot of functions. One of my functions is working with employees and employers to get them to and from work, using not just fixed bus route system, but other ways as well. So that's part of why Craig brought me here.
So I invited her to, we were talking locally, and I said, hey, why don't you come and just listen in on some of our conversations, even though we're going to be talking about our quarterly a lot today. But as we've identified as a group, one of the major barriers is transportation for youth. And I was explaining how in some parts of the state, they don't even teach driver's ed at the high school level, like they do it in my kids' school. But when we talk about opportunity youth, even if they learn how to drive, is there a vehicle available for them to drive, right? So I figured Beth she knows the Chicagoland suburban area, let's say, but my guess is long-term, she might have some partners across the state that she could plug us into to break down some of those barriers, or at least brainstorm, right? So Beth, thank you for joining us today, and hope you enjoy the meeting. I'll look forward to downloading with you on your thoughts. Cool. Marcy?
All right. Yes, welcome, Beth, and I'm sure that we'll have lots of things. Something came up just recently in my department, and we're trying to figure out this piece with the driver's ed for many different transportation issues, so for students. So thank you. Yes, and so before we go on, do we want Brian to introduce himself, or did he do that the last time?
No, Brian is new. He's our new bureau chief, but Gary Reuter.
Okay,
yes,
so Brian, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. I am the new bureau chief for positive youth development out of Springfield. 30 years combined experience as an educator and as a child welfare administrator. So I'm excited to join the team here out of Springfield and just look to continue to do great things with the Department of Human Services. So I'm just happy to be here and hope we can continue to move things forward here in Illinois.
Great. Well, welcome. And I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just a little review. As we've talked before, here are our deliverables, work plan, and timeline that we had all talked about for our group. And of course, we identified the segments that we thought were within the opportunity youth. We have identified the barriers. We're now today going to talk about, the strategies, solutions, and tools that we want to start to work on. And then I also see us starting to make that transition over to reach out to the business sector to understand their needs. So we'll see that as we move along. And then once we get to that point, then we're going to start marketing this and, getting it out and targeting people so that they're more aware of, those supports that are being provided so that everyone can have access to the different career paths. Craig.
Okay, so from our January meeting, again, we did a kind of a Pareto and survey of what we thought were the most demanding barriers that we needed to address. And you can see from this survey, transportation was one. So that's how I reached out to Beth. Also, lack of basic needs and career awareness. We can see there's a whole group there. Those middle three are very close. Of course, I'm pointing at my screen. I noticed nobody can see me doing that. Thanks, Sarah. So that's really kind of the meat and potatoes that we think that is actually achievable in us addressing, because we know some of those barriers are going to be long-term stuff and inviting people to the table like Beth to see what can we do to move that needle long-term, but then also what can we do in the short term that could provide more immediate results. So that's where you're going to see that section as part of our work plan. And I think one of the great opportunities is we're going to be talking about it with our quarterly meeting as well. So again, this just goes into a little bit more detail when we break down those big pieces, right? What some of that detail is below, and how we can build upon that. When we think about the lack of career awareness, from our discussion, we talked about really what can we do more to drive career awareness beyond what we're doing today, because so often we hear, oh, we're having a job fair, we're having a career fair, right? What can we do that's more innovative? And in between, in the last meeting, I think we'll probably share some resources that we've obtained as we've reached out to different people to try to start gathering some of those best practices. What are the state resources? See, that's perfect timing, Sarah. This naturally flows into it. And showcase what are we doing in isolated or regional areas that we can use as a model to raise up and share everywhere, and try to see how can we implement that in different areas across the state. So you'll see those coming towards us shortly. So Marcy, I'll let you continue.
So we had such a robust conversation at our last meeting. In fact, Craig and I and Molly and Sarah walked away feeling really energized by how much engagement we had. So I hope you all felt the same way. So our two big areas that we felt really bubbled to the top was career awareness and transportation. And based on the conversation and the career awareness, we tried to break it down to some solutions or some supports that we could provide. And so under the career awareness, we felt we needed to understand what each of the state agencies are offering, what resources are already out there, instead of trying to recreate the wheel. Also looking at where business resources were and how to connect to business and career awareness. And again, as Craig was saying, not just a career fair, but what other ways can we get businesses engaged in that awareness and what is out there? And then start showcasing those best practices. So we know that a lot of school districts and colleges are doing some really great things for career awareness. So how can we highlight that, share it, and then be able to get everybody to know that these are ideas. Under transportation, the same way, we really want to see what resources are out there, connecting and understanding those business resources that can maybe help us figure out the issues and trying to address the barriers for transportation. Sometimes we think it's a barrier and maybe it's only in pockets of the state. And so we need to understand where we're at, and then, you know, again, showcasing those best practices. So if somebody has it figured out, we want to make sure that we can share that. So one of the things that we want to keep in mind, and we want you to think about, and we'll talk about in a little bit, is, you know, our goal is, if we find all these resources, we need a repository for to put those resources, so that anybody in the state, whether you're a school district, a college, or a business, that you know where to go and to find those resources. And so we just need to think about where we would house that, how we would house that, and, you know, how we would communicate that a little bit later down the road. Okay, so the next one. So one of the things that we as a committee has been charged with is developing a work plan. So Craig and I and Sarah and Molly, we got together and we started just plugging in what we thought would be good steps for a work plan based on the conversations that we had at our last meeting. So as you can see, we've already done the February meeting here. The February 22nd meeting is just finalizing things for the quarterly meeting. Then in April, we really want to start looking at the career awareness, finding out or hearing from different agencies about the resources that are out there, and trying to decide where would we put, what would that repository look like, and where would we put it. Then in May, we want to still do career awareness, but now at this time we want to engage businesses and organizations and trying to get their thoughts and what's going on out there for career awareness. And that might be a little bit harder. So those of you that know what businesses are doing, we need to let us know who we should tap into for that. Then we won't, in June, we're going to have the quarterly meeting. So we won't meet in June. Again, like I said, we won't meet in March either. So for July, then we're going to transition to transportation. So hopefully prior to the June meeting, we've got things sort of figured out with the career awareness. And then we'll start working on the transportation piece. Again, the same way. What are the state resources? And then what is the business resources? Then in September, again, we won't meet because of the quarterly meeting. And then in October, we will really look at what we have in the repository. Then how are we going to start marketing it? How are we going to share that information, and what needs to be our next steps? And then come November, we'll start thinking about, okay, what's going to be our next steps? Did we accomplish what we wanted to accomplish? Do we still need to tie up some loose ends? Or are we ready to go on to the next three that we said were important to us, which is the education credentials, the lack of basic needs, and the lack of parental connections that'll engage in our new work plan for 2024. And then, of course, in December then is the recap meeting where we'll share, each group will share what they've accomplished throughout the year. So I've thrown a lot at you in the last two slides. Any questions? I wanted to make sure that the two are connected, because I wanted you to see that this is our plan based on what we shared. So I just want to pause for a minute and see, is there any questions that we've shared that maybe we forgot or we didn't take into consideration?
Hey, Marcy, this is Antoinette Golden from DES. I don't necessarily have any questions, but what I'd like to do also is at the April meeting on April 26th, can DES share our career information system information? Because we have a career exploratory system that's free. And so I think it would be good. I think that would be a perfect spot to highlight some of the resources DES has around career exploration.
That is a great idea. And so, Sarah, if we can add to the April 26th meeting, IDES to that meeting, Antoinette, ISAC and IDES and us are also working on an extension of the CIS for CIS 360. And so that would be hopefully a great way just to say what's coming. So thank you for bringing that up.
Fantastic, thank you.
And that's a great example of where we need everybody's input. We try to be all inclusive, but there's so many tools out there that imagine being a teacher or a business trying to engage, and you know, it's like whack-a-mole as far as where do we go. We see resources keep on popping up and we're not sure which is the right one. So that's really that long-term goal, is to try to get everything pointed into one direction.
I know we have a lot of representatives on this call. If there's anyone from any of these state agencies that would want to volunteer for resource share, like Craig and Marcy have said, this is not a comprehensive list. We don't know all the information. That's the goal, is to better understand the resources. So if anybody on the call would like to, help in helping the group understand, I will definitely be in touch for the April meeting.
And this is a work plan.
Mhm.
It's just a plan, be it because of the volume of work. We'd rather see that and get it right to make sure that we get all the resources. Because again, at the end, it's going to be we want to create tools that are usable for the different stakeholders. So Marcy, I think we just want to get everybody's thumbs up that people are good with this,
Again,
right?
it's fluid. It can adjust, but if you think we're on the right page, so yeah, could you just give us a thumbs up if you feel like we're on the right track here? And then if you think there's some more work we need to do with that.
I do have a quick question. You have businesses and colleges. Do you have churches in your external stakeholder group as well?
I don't think so. Do we, Sarah?
Don't have any representatives in this work group from any faith-based organizations. That's not to say that they can't be included. It's just that we don't have any representatives currently. So if you know people who do outreach, I'm kind of going out on a limb, who with youth, this is a public meeting. And I know, like Craig and Marcy have said, we want to make sure we get as much representation from the states. I'm sure they would be welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Brian, that would fit into that, community organizations. Molly's not necessarily a state agency. She's not an employer. They're a non-for-profit, community partner that interacts with youth, right? So certainly a church that in any type of religious organization that engages in that work, we'd love to hear from them what they're doing. And particularly if they're engaging businesses, tell them to bring the business along. We always want to because that's the end goal, right? Is how do we tie this into the business? So
absolutely. Thank you.
That's awesome, Dean. Thank you.
Yeah. So Brian, if you know somebody, or if somebody else knows of somebody, just shoot that email to us and we'll make sure we'll get them invited. Okay.
Okay, that sounds good.
Great.
Thank you.
And I'll go ahead and add community before this organization to community organization business ideas that would be more encompassing with that.
Yes.
And I skipped. I'll move on to the discussion if it's okay, Mercy.
So now we just want to get some feedback from you all, and Sarah will take notes on this, but here's some of our questions that we're wondering about. And we've already really started this conversation, right? What other state entities should we reach out to for best practices for career awareness? So we know that IDS needs to be on this list. Is there any other state entities that you could think of that maybe we need to, if nothing else, investigate? And you can throw it in the chat, or go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that Department of Corrections might be an area that is of interest, are in the juvenile justice system. I know that they have interest in doing inside of facilities more career awareness and development. So that might be another area of interest for us.
Good point. DJJ and Department of Corrections. Yeah. Mhm. Great. Anybody else on state entities? And if you think of it, you can throw it in the chat too. How about organizations, businesses? Like Brian said, we need to include, talk to churches and see what they're doing. What other businesses, what businesses should we reach out to? I mean, like Molly is coordinating with other entities to bring career awareness. She does this a lot. So I'm just wondering what other kinds of businesses are doing those sort of things around career awareness that's bringing businesses and schools and colleges together for this type of exploration. Anybody have any other thoughts or ideas on that?
I see Mitch has his hand up, so I want to defer to him real quick, and then I'll have some ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say this is an area that we've been doing a lot of work in. So actually, like today, I'll be meeting with the AFL-CIO leadership to talk a little bit about some of these types of opportunities and how they're going to build apprenticeship pathways or pipelines into their apprenticeship programs. But actually, there's a lot of industry associations, the Illinois Manufacturers Association, Choose Aerospace, the Associated Equipment Distributors, that are all really focused on this right now. We're working on building kind of a coalition of these groups specifically to talk about career awareness and how we can, better support that, because I think they're all trying to do it in their own segmented ways. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. And I think a lot of interested groups that would love to work on and collaborate with this group to do career awareness for their different industry sectors. And those industry associations have obviously membership bases that all attach to our local communities. So I think that's a really good coordinating body for the business side of it as it relates to different industries that are of high demand and high wage.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, those are great ideas, Mitch. And I would just add, I know that Marcy, through your organization, we're well represented, but just the colleges, community colleges, other four-year institutions who are thinking about high growth occupations and ensuring that all of the schools in their footprint area have exposure to those career areas. So just making sure we have that voice at the table.
Good point.
Mitch triggered something else for me too. I thought of something else. You may already have them, but Commerce Commission with CEJA and all the clean energy stuff. There's so many new jobs out there that folks just don't even know about tied to clean energy since that act passed. So there's just a ton of stuff out there for new apprenticeship programs tied to clean energy that are just untapped.
Good point. Good point. Anyone else on the organizations and businesses?
Marcy, a quick question on the ISBE career, the career catalog or the career guide.
Yep.
But I think it's maybe year 3 with that. It is, and maybe will there be maybe resources outlined by each of those pathways and each of those areas? Is that kind of maybe what we're thinking here yet as well? Just because I feel you have a lot of good momentum with that career guide that could be expanded upon.
Good. Yes. Great point. And I mean, and thinking about when we think about the businesses, you hate to put people into little packages, right? But when we think about the 16 or 17 career clusters that we have, making sure we have representation from all those different areas. So that's a great point, Dean. Thanks.
I was going to say that's the big thing, is identifying in each of these areas where we can drive business engagement and innovation with that engagement. And I think some great examples is if you've attended any manufacturing day events where we're getting kids hands-on with different events, or getting Molly has run some great events with getting students talking to business leaders, not just having the business leaders, stand up and give a presentation, but having them truly engaged. So, when we think about each of these areas, that's where I think the help with the businesses, because I can tell you, as I talk to businesses, they're going, how do I do this? I don't know how. Show me the way. So creating that repository and sharing with us, hey, this company does it really well, right? Is what we need as we work in that space, that we see a company doing it well and asking them to come to the table.
Yeah, Craig, and as you know, we are trying to move those relationships from just those initial exposure conversations between companies and schools to developing hands-on activities that students in the schools can do with those companies. And so the evolution of those relationships is important. And as we learn more about the success of those initiatives, we'll share back with this group as we're helping companies think about what are those kinds of hands-on team-based challenges that they could help support in the schools, using a lot of creative methods. So excited to share more as it relates to the CTE initiatives at each school.
Great.
Mitch,
Okay.
Another organization that, and it's kind of, it's not necessarily a state entity, but Deborah Cremines Risinger from DOL, that's the state director for the Department of Labor. She'd be really great to engage in this, and her team of all those reps for DOL. I think that they have a lot of ideas, and it would be, and they're connecting directly with business on those apprenticeship development. So that'd be another group to make sure we engage in these conversations. And honestly, they might be interested in being standing members of just like these conversations as well.
Yeah, I was also thinking maybe the Chamber of Commerce, right? Because they also have another connection to all the businesses. So that might be another thought too.
Yeah. Yeah, Chicagoland Chamber has a full workforce package that they're working on now too. So they have a really high interest in that. Another kind of group that's similar that to the work we're doing is the Illinois Innovation Network. Is doing a lot on workforce right now. They're more focused on big grant opportunities. Some tie-in here on, especially to Brian's point, like CJA and broadband and a couple of the other areas that they're focused on developing grant and training programs for.
And what I love about this conversation, it's giving us some ideas. I think, maybe Marcy and Molly and Sarah, of how we can maybe organize this. I think from a business standpoint, industry sector partnerships, right? Like employers, but we might have employer groups, we might have employer associations, educators, right? Teachers, and then have some breakdowns of what they can do and where to go to build kind of this one-stop shop for career awareness.
Yeah, Craig, I think there's so many people that are trying to do the work, and if we can get everybody together a little bit easier, it'll definitely smooth some of this out. And also,
let's stop reinventing the wheel every time. Steal from one another. Absolutely. And augment and create innovation.
And I mean, the more you can do to braid funding too, the better that makes it for everybody involved, because because that's at the end of the day, that's what the big barrier is for a lot of folks.
Yep. All right. In the interest of time, we'll keep going, and then we can always circle back if there's anything else. How about when we talk about transportation? Is there other state agencies? One I was thinking of is maybe we should have the Secretary of State engaged in this as well. I don't know what you guys think about that, but who else should we be reaching out to when it comes to transportation? Or maybe it's the Department of Transportation. I don't know. So what are your thoughts there?
I'm on a team, and I haven't been in a while, but there's a lady called Terry Finn, and she is the coordinator for human service transportation in regions 9, 10, and 11, which is kind of the southern part of the state, with the Central Illinois Regional Planning and Development Commission. I think she might be helpful. I'll put her information in the chat.
Great.
Thanks, LaDonna. Also, last meeting, oh, Jasmine, you go for it. Your hand's up.
You might have been about to say this, but you know, Uber and Lyft have the transportation, they have the transportation initiatives where they can like earmark a certain amount of funds that your agency can use. So we've used it previously at the partnership, and it's super user friendly in terms of allowing like case managers to set rides, set pickups, either scheduled, or you could just send someone a link where then they can schedule their own ride. And you still have a decent level of control over it because you can kind of control the addresses. You can have people give you the addresses in advance. But I think that if we could educate nonprofits, like maybe meet with their like community development and educate nonprofits about how to get accounts set up, maybe, you know, we can get them to commit to 5 or 10K for each organization. This is Uber and Lyft. So when we used it, Molly, it was my personal experience is with Uber. So they had given us some money and we divvied it up among a number of our agencies. But I think we could get more out of it if the nonprofits themselves could go directly to Uber. So I'm happy to provide, you know, any information I can in terms of making that connection.
Yeah, I love that. And then you were right on the money, Jasmine. We talked about this last month some, and I know Mark Lohman said that maybe his LWIA was doing something in terms of transportation. I think LWIA resources would also be really something accessible to scale to other portions of the state. So if anybody's aware what their LWIP's doing, like LWIA 7, you were just saying, that would also be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, can you share what you were doing?
Yes. A local workforce investment area has a lot of authority to set its own policy, but Western Illinois Works Local Workforce Investment Area 14 is 9 counties from Galesburg to Monmouth to Quincy to Macomb and on down to Pike County. And as a supportive service, we do pay a lot of reimbursement for transportation. This local area is, does have some of the smaller and medium-sized cities that I named, but it has a lot of rural areas. And so transportation can be self-provided, or it can be using a public service or you know, an independent operator like Uber or Lyft. So that is not speaking for all of the 22 local areas, but it is an opportunity that our youth formula funds, as well as our adult formula funds and dislocated worker, can be used for those types of personal expenses.
And then Mark, can you also speak when you're doing reimbursement? Is it just gas, or are there certain providers that people are utilizing that are beyond just giving people a gas card or whatnot? Because I know you work in a number of rural areas.
So that is something that I will do some checking and get back to you. I started in this local area at the end of December, and so I'm still learning. I approve a lot of reimbursements for individuals for costs of transportation. And I'm not aware that we have any contracts with providers at this point, but that is something that a local area could have the authority to do if it's part of their local policy. So I'll do some checking, Craig, and let you know.
And Craig, I can put a list together of the different transportation providers in the state. I might be able to pull some more in-depth info on some other entities providing transportation. I can tell you everybody in Will County, but I can look and see if I can expand that information beyond the PACE service area.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there any other organizations or businesses we should reach out to? Because we kind of transitioned a little bit into that right now.
So Eric just posted supportive services and just corporate. Again, just getting people access to driver's education area that's outside the school system. Maybe make a centralized directory, like I said, maybe that's where Secretary of State, or there might be resources there. Because I mean, most people today, when we were looking with our teenagers, deciding if we were going to use the school or private, we just Googled it.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point, that these don't all have to have short-term remedies. They could be longer term that the group is earmarking, that we'll be working on behind the scenes also. So thanks, Eric, for putting that into the chat. Yeah, and the resources, I think Shannon put in the chat that IDOT might be a really great, and Shannon, you can come off mute if you want to, but IDOT would be a really great entity to engage with already. So maybe that's if anybody on the call also has someone they know at IDOT, you can put it in the chat and I'll make sure to. Oh, there we go. Okay,
great. Okay. So, and keep throwing that out there if you have any more, we need that information as well. So then the next thought is, where would be a good place to house all the resources that we're going to find and pull together? What would be a great central location, or where would people go? Or, I mean, and we've talked about the fact that it still could be housed in one spot, but then all of us post on our website that link to that resource. So it wouldn't be solely like, okay, that's the only thing we're going to do, but who can help like manage the resources and make sure we keep it up to date and things like that. Any thoughts there? And we can think about it, maybe just start thinking about it, and we can toss around some ideas and throw it back out to you later and see what you think. So, okay. So I think that's the question, Shannon. Wherever we're going to house it would have to maintain the site. Okay. So yeah, next.
and Craig, I don't know if you want me to run through what the quarterly meeting will entail before we go through Q&A. Okay, I'll switch this slide first.
That'd be great. Either you or Marcy, again, 601.
Yep.
You can do it. Go ahead.
Okay. So coming up in March is the quarterly meeting. And so our subcommittee is going to be the first ones to present at it. So this is a way for us to share with the entire CPT group about the Opportunity Youth. So our agenda for the day we'll meet in Bloomington, and we'll got that below. It's going to be at the Heartland Community College. We'll have that meeting from 9:30 to 11:30. And then from 12 to 1, we will go to the Bloomington Area Career Center, and we will tour the Area Career Center. We thought that it would be helpful for everybody to really have an understanding of what the Area Career Center is and what there is to offer. We have asked Tom Frazier from the Area Career Center to present about his career center, but also he's going to invite a principal or somebody from the school district that he works with that talks about that connection. And then he is working on a business person that they work with. He works with many of them, and he's going to bring a champion along to share how it's all connected. So this is what our plan is for that March meeting that we hope that all of you will be able to join. And I think, Sarah, it's in person and virtual, correct?
Yes, it'll be
Yes.
in person and then we'll have virtual options. Yep.
So given that that's the plan, now Craig has questions for you.
So, you know, the intent on this is to be an engaging meeting. So we want to come up with, you know, knowing that these are the panelists, right? A career center, a principal, a business. We want to have prepared questions for them to drive engagement and kind of give them an idea of what questions are going to come at them. So we would really like to kind of just spend the next few minutes thinking about, you know, what questions are probably on people's minds that members of the panel can answer. Not everybody at once. So an example would be, you know, with the business, how did you find out and start working with the local career center, right? That might be an example.
Or what barriers are you having as you support the students? It could be, what barriers do you have to work-based learning? You know, that's one of the things. Or, you know, career awareness and transportation is our big questions, right? So what do you do for career awareness?
Yeah, I like strengths and opportunities for growth because I think they're going to have some of the same barriers. I was a dean, I was a former principal, and I believe some of the barriers echo some of the things that we talked about in earlier slides. So how they manage to get around those and strategically plan and have success, I think is going to help both what we're going to try and do and what they're going to try and do and how do we partner. And it also even goes back to some of the maintaining the site questions we have and how do we house some of these hubs using existing things that are in place at colleges and some of these career centers, because they get visibility too from some of these initiatives that we put out there. So how can we utilize what's already in place that's already working in these grassroots community situations? So I think we can kind of pull them all together and really kind of move forward with it, kind of do like a SWOT analysis with them as far as how we work with and reach more vulnerable populations.
I like that. Thanks, Brian. Anybody else?
So what would you, I would say, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to mention the Bloomington Career Center, as far as if they provided some statistics as far as student participation, maybe what pathways, participation, the number of schools involved as well as to, you know, are they definitely being successful? And then, yes, as far as, you know, what barriers have they overcome and what ideas have they had to overcome those barriers?
It's perfect. What about to a principal, you know, a school administrator? Any questions that you can think of? Because we'd like to break these up and have kind of groupings of questions. Molly, I know you interact with a lot of school administrators and getting, you know, students involved. What's some of those burning questions that as you engage with them?
Well, I mean, I always like to ask schools if they are engaged with their regional economic development entity in any way for relationships with companies. I think that's the biggest challenge of any school district is to navigate those relationships with companies, and that typically the local economic development entity is a great liaison. So a question about that, do you have an existing relationship with an economic development provider? If so, have they proven valuable as an intermediary with companies on a strategy level, to understand what businesses are coming, what are facing workforce shortages or challenges, and how education might be a potential solution.
Great. So I see a couple things in the chat. Eric, we're working on finding out what specific school they come with. Tom is helping coordinate that from the schools that they partner with in Bloomington. So we might have that. We should have that probably in the coming weeks here. Mitch states, what resources, staff time, funding, business are you leveraging? Wonderful question, right? Everything costs money, right? How are you paying for this? And what barriers do you face with them?
Yeah, follow up to that is I think, the more we can do to have them kind of put the imagery out there of like what all is involved in a successful program, how much time planning, commitment, et cetera. Just mapping that out, I think helps a lot of folks kind of start envisioning how they can do it themselves.
I think that's probably pretty good given our time here. What we would ask you is, again, as we try to develop the slate of questions, think about this over the next, maybe just today. We've got a nice early morning meeting. If you could make it a priority today to think of one engaging question similar to what we've been discussing for one of the three groups, whether it be school administrator, a business, or the career center. If each person could come up with one question, that would be a huge step forward for us.
Perfect. Yep, and you have everyone's email. You can feel free to email it on.
Yep.
Great.
Cool.
Okay, I'm gonna move forward to.
So for this part, we just wanted to bring to the group and see what your thoughts are. We know that in the other work groups, each meeting, they bring in one success story that they share about what's going well. And we were wondering if you felt that that would also help us. We know, it just reminds us and grounds us in why we are doing what we're doing. So what are your thoughts about that? Or do you have another idea on how we can maybe like keep each other engaged on what's going on throughout the state? So anybody have any ideas related to that?
Do people like the idea of kicking off the meetings with a success story?
Yeah, I think so. I think it sounds great. It's always gives a moment of inspiration and also a reminder about why we're passionate about this work. There's plenty of people connected to organizations on the ground, I'd say, in this group. So yeah, I think so. I find that's a useful activity at my organization for our regular meetings. Even though everyone that works for us is doing the work on the ground, we still share success stories regularly with one another. So I think it's a useful activity, valuable. I'm happy to volunteer for an upcoming month to bring a story from OAI. There's kind of two approaches I imagine you're thinking. One is that one of us shares a story from our learning, or another is that we actually invite someone to attend who could talk about their own story I see
Yes!
you cheering.
Yeah, but
That
I
is
think it's
sometimes a little more
good to serve.
complicated, but certainly a worthwhile endeavor, you know, and if you can't get them to attend for whatever reason, the best reason being that they're working and unavailable, but it doesn't hurt to ask and try.
Correct, Molly. I think that would be the awesome part. As you know, I always ask for business engagement or that lived experience engagement. So when we think about good, better, best, you know, it's great if we can have one of us share that success story. It's even better if we can have the employer. The best is to have the employer and the individual. And some of the models that we've used for some of our meetings is a video, right, where they take a quick video of the person with lived experience. That actually works really well. I think we found with some of the youth, as they're not always comfortable or have that environment, just ask them to do a 30-second video that we can share about, you know, how they found out about whatever program led them to that employer and what they've learned and what they benefited from, right? So
Great
that's
point.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to start maybe earmarking volunteers for the next couple months if we have some time? I know Molly, you said I'll get off this, maybe type. Would you be interested in a certain month?
Sure, we could start with April. Do we have any other volunteers on the call? And this is for this subcommittee, right? So not to the larger.
Correct. It's for our
but
work
to
group.
this group.
Correct.
Okay.
Now what that opportunity presents, Molly, you bring up a great point. I've seen it successful is that maybe as we talk about these things, you know, we might use that in a webinar, you know, ask that person to participate again, right? If it was a really meaningful and, you know, it's such a great practice that we might ask that person down the road to help us tell that story to a larger audience. But initially, it's just for this group.
Okay.
Jasmine's got her hand up.
I do. I like to volunteer for May.
Oh, I love it.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, feel free to keep volunteering in the chat or come off mute.
I know I'm not part of the committee, but I just wanted to throw this out to you guys as a suggestion. If you do the success stories and you've got those two goals of, you know, the partnering with businesses and organizations in the state and then also transportation, it would be good to have the success stories talk about how they overcame those two goal obstacles, because then it makes your success story also accountable. If that makes sense.
Yeah. How that person overcame the barrier that we've identified. That's a really great point, Beth. Okay. I'll go back to presentation mode. And go on to the next steps. Marcy, do you want to go ahead and?
Oh, sure. Yes. So our next meeting, of course, is today. And so we will cancel the March work group meeting I said earlier. So Sarah will send out that cancellation. The next work group meeting will be April 26th from 9:30 to 10:30. And it sounds like we'll have Molly present at that one for the success stories, correct? And then we will start, and Sarah, or can you go back just a little bit to our work plan piece?
Oh, yeah.
So then for that April meeting, that's when we're also going to be reaching out to some of our state resources to present. So if there are a few of you who would also like to present at that next meeting, just not really a presentation. Let's just start talking about, what resources you have available related to career awareness that we can share. So, for example, the one on Antoinette on IDES, if you or someone could present on about the CIS, that would be great. Shannon, there might be something from DCO that you're working on or you have that we can share as well as we start to think about pulling together those resources that we need. So that will be our focus for the April meeting.
And I have one ask or homework assignment, Marcy, because
Okay.
it's a youth group. Is besides thinking of a question before the end of the day, in the next 48 hours, see if you can invite so everybody in their calendar should have an invite and a link to the registration for the meeting. Invite a business to hear about the work that we're doing and learn some of these best practices. So that's the ask, is that over the next 48 hours, you identify at least one business that you have a relationship with that you can tell about the meeting and invite them that they could come in person if they register, or certainly depending on where they are in the state and their schedule, we would love to have them attend virtually.
Yep. And I can send an email reminder, like a app today, just because I know everybody's days gets pretty busy.
Yep. And I know we had to update the link.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know. I mean, we're allowing an hour for our meetings, and as you can tell, we're right at that hour, and we do want to end. But if you feel like that this is something that maybe should be an hour and a half instead of an hour, we want your thoughts on that. We want it to be meaningful. We don't want to take away from your entire day. So any thoughts with that, just let us know.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you all for joining today. Lots of good thoughts, input. And again, we're just trying to help coordinate it, but it really is all of you for the subcommittee to make supports for our youth. So thank you very much.
Hey, one thing before we jump, I want to share with the group,
Sure.
so everyone has it on the radar. So the Department of Labor put out grant forecasting for the year. And there are actually a couple, I think, that are relevant to the scope of this group that I wanted to just make sure you all have on your radar. One is like a youth pathway development grant that works with like a OST, so like a Boys and Girls Club or other types of national organizations. But then one of them, which I think falls into something that we talked about today, which is some of these job pathways that are emerging markets like broadband and CEJA, is the DOL Building Pathways to Infrastructure Jobs Grant. So it's funding for advanced manufacturing, broadband, and there's a couple other BIL, the bipartisan infrastructure law that are in there. But wanted to make sure everyone had that on their radar. I don't know if it's in the scope of the work of this group, but I do know that the IAN, the Illinois Innovation Network Workforce Group, is planning to look at some of these and seeing how we can pull together applications as a state. So I wanted to make sure you're all aware of this because I think that there's some maybe potential to eliminate some barriers in terms of funding from DOL's maybe big statewide grant opportunities.
Yeah, and I wonder too, Shannon's on here from DCEO, and Shannon, if you guys are thinking of applying for any of these as well, and you need some support in thinking about what that would look like, please reach out to us as well.
Yeah, and Mitch, I'll connect with you offline, and maybe if you have links or something, I can make sure that they're sent out to the work group.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds great, Sarah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for your engagement.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.